Now, Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick has offered his answer to the cladding crisis in England. It's not just about offering money to repair cladding, as we heard about earlier. A solution needs to be found to the market in flats being paralysed by uncertainty over which buildings need what work, and by a shortage of surveyors to go and find out, building by building. The mortgage companies demand a form, the EWS1 form, before they'll lend against many of these properties, but that includes some buildings that don't really have dodgy cladding. Now, on all of that, this is what Mr. Jenrick had to say today.
The Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors have consulted on new guidance for valuers on when an EWS1 form should actually be required. The government endorses its work to ensure that assessors have a stronger basis on which to make good, proportionate judgments about valuation risk. Lenders have welcomed the progress on this guidance, which will help ensure that over 500,000 leaseholders in blocks of flats over 11 metres will not need a separate EWS1 assessment to get a mortgage. This builds on the interventions that we've already made to create and train many more assessors, and we're doing so further so that they can access professional indemnity insurance to get on with the job.
Well, quite a dense paragraph that, quite a lot packed into it, but some of those details may be quite important. Things like indemnity insurance and more surveyors may make a difference. Back in November, I went to meet Thomas, actually, he's French, in South London, after he got in touch with PM to raise concern about his block of flats there. Does today's announcement help him?
My personal situation is that I bought my flat in September 2017 as a shared ownership owner. So I own a 75% share in my flat. And right now we are stuck in limbo with lenders requiring an EWS1 form, which is an intrusive wall survey form, in order to provide finance. So I can't remortgage or staircase to full ownership of my flat. And someone willing to buy my flat would not be able to get finance.
What did you make of what you heard from Robert Jenrick today?
Mix of emotion between disappointment and outrage, because basically it really falls short. So it's the continuation of the government's approach towards providing a piecemeal a solution towards a wider crisis. And in my opinion, they do not seem to be willing to actually tackle the wider issue. So the approach that they've announced today, it only addresses cladding, and what's been shown over and over again is that this scandal goes so much further in terms of other types of historic fire safety defects, such as wooden balconies, missing fire break, flammable insulation, all of those which are totally unaddressed via the new government announcement from today. Now, outrage for me really was around the time where the housing minister cited caveat emptor about, that there's inherent risk into buying a property in England, and that, we should basically kind of swallow it. And that for me was just like really outrageous that the housing minister kind of like said that when it's been almost 4 years since Grenfell and the scandal is well known, and seems like they're not really getting it.
One of the problems in your building is you don't really know what the situation is. You don't know whether that little piece of wooden cladding is a serious fire danger. We don't know whether your wooden balconies are a serious fire danger. You need someone to come in and to properly assess what that building needs in the way of remediation. One of the problems at the moment is there just aren't enough people to do that.
Yeah. Since you last visited us, the Housing Association had informed us that they would carry out intrusive fire risk assessment, which are not the EWS1, but another type. Now, we don't have any results so far about what this assessment would have flagged, but it would actually not necessarily give us anything in terms of progressing the situation with lenders, with remortgaging, with moving on with our lives, unless there's really proper advice that trickles down from the top of the government all the way down to all of the basically stakeholders to accept that those kind of checks have been done, and that maybe there is no risk, that there is a risk-based approach or not, and all of that.
Thomas there, living in a kind of Kafkaesque cladding nightmare. Well, Dame Judith Hackitt conducted an independent review into building regulations and fire safety after the Grenfell Tower fire. She currently chairs the Industry Safety Steering Group, which is set up to hold the construction industry to account on behalf of the Ministry of Housing, and she joins us. And let's start, Dame Judith, by perhaps just getting your reaction to what you heard Robert Jenrick announce today.
Thanks. Good evening, Evan. I certainly welcome the news of the funding and the certainty that this gives in terms of financial support to leaseholders in those highest properties over 18 metres, and I think we should recognise that. I also very much welcome the news that developers and industry are going to be made to pay through this levy and tax that the Secretary of State also announced. Because, as we keep saying, this problem was not caused by the leaseholders. It's unfair to ask them to pay, just as it was not caused by the taxpayer either. So it's really important that I think we place at least some of the onus where it should be. Mm-hmm. But having said all of that, I do recognise the ongoing uncertainty for those in buildings less than 18 metres, like Thomas, who you've just talked to. And I absolutely agree with what you say, that what we've got to do now is get back to discussing with others who have an important role to play in bringing proportion and common sense back into this debate and redressing some of that undoubted overreaction that has taken place.
Well, look, I wanted from the horse's mouth, so to speak, what is the policy? What should be the policy on wooden balconies? There are loads of places that have wooden balconies. No one was ever in any doubt that wood burns. It's not like you don't need a cladding engineer to tell you that. What do we need to worry about wooden balconies and go out and replace them or not?
We don't need to worry about all wooden balconies. This is about fire engineering. You have to understand how fire is likely to spread on a building. That is why we have to do these assessments of the exterior of buildings, and I really welcome the fact that we're training more people to do that work. But what's also important is not just that we're training more people, but we're training them to be intelligent assessors and to come up with proportionate and sensible assessments of the risk, rather than simply taking this view that if there's any cladding there or any wood there, that's bad news, because that's not true. We've created and added to the distress of leaseholders, I think, unnecessarily. The reality is that many of the buildings will be declared safe. The likelihood of a major fire in a building is low in the base case. We know from all of the statistics that it is those buildings above 18 metres where there is a 4 times greater risk of fatality in the unlikely event that a fire does occur. So I keep coming back to this question of why are we requiring EWS1 forms? Why are we declaring zero value on properties that shouldn't even be a cause for concern? And especially because of the distress that's causing to the leaseholders who live in them.
It's so important that you say that, and you're the person who needs to say that in a way. Could I just ask you, the 18 metres above 18, below 18, is that the right threshold? Clearly, Robert Jenrick says if you're an inch above that, you get it all paid. And if you're below that, you're going to have to pay yourself through some elaborate loan scheme. Is that the right threshold?
The evidence is clear that it is in buildings that are more than 18 metres tall, there is a 4 times greater risk of a fatality occurring if a major fire breaks out. This is all about ease of evacuation of the building. If the building is less than 18 metres tall, there is a really, really high level of confidence that people can be got out of the building safely and quickly in the event that needs to happen.
That's really important. Just one last very quick one, if you would. When we look at all the other stuff, not the cladding, and we've heard a lot about this today, the people saying, no, the nightmare is we've got lots of other problems, fire breaks that are dodgy and the like. Are those regulatory problems where the taxpayer, in a sense, takes some responsibility because we failed to regulate or enforce regulation? Or are those just bad workmanship problems, which really are a developer problem rather than a regulatory one?
It's a combination. It really is a combination of the fact that the regulation, in my view, did not place responsibility where it should be with those who built the buildings in the first place. We're going to change that. It's also about poor workmanship and lack of competence. We're going to fix that too. So I think what we also need to do is not just look at what's happened today in isolation. It's not a piecemeal, as some people have said, one-off shot at trying to fix the problem. This is yet another step in addressing a whole systemic range of failures that we need to do. And we will end up with a world-class regulatory system that will rebuild confidence in our ability to build high-rise buildings that are safe and secure for people to live in.
Dame Judith Hackitt, appreciate you